Safety in the roadway. This is CrimeWatch.
The other transients in the area are becoming more routine with the driver.
Oh, great.
Okay, you'll start that way.
So,
Hello and welcome to Crime Watch. I'm Jane Cameron with Sergeant Chris Nunez of the Buena Park Police Department. We're standing in the middle of Orange Thorpe, just near Western, and right before we arrived here there was a pretty severe traffic accident.
yeah, apparently a pedestrian was walking across Orange Thorpe, and no, all of this is still preliminary. We just arrived on scene. So the traffic officers are here and they're investigating. This does appear to be a serious collision, but it was this white car and a pedestrian. So other than that, that's really all the information we have so far. So we still haven't identified the pedestrian. Some preliminary information indicates that she might actually be a homeless person, a transient that frequents this area. So we're still checking into all of that. So of course the owners and driver of this white car back here are pretty shaken up. They're fine otherwise, and from this point forward the investigation will continue.
You know, what does a driver do when they hit somebody? Obviously, they stayed in the area, and that's the right thing to do, right?
Right, that is the right thing to do. Now, as we were responding to this accident, there was additional information broadcasted that other homeless people that were already in the area were upset about what happened, and were yelling at the driver. So officers got here pretty quickly and managed the crowd that was here. So yeah, stay in the area. If you get out of your car and you start wandering around, then you could put yourself in danger. It is dark out here. It's just been a few days since the time change, so the time has moved back an hour, and so it gets dark early, and so all of those factors will be looked at in terms of a cause.
Not in relation to this situation, but just in general. You know, as a driver, you're not supposed to hit a pedestrian. But if the pedestrian isn't in the crosswalk, do you still face liability as a driver if you hit them?
Yeah, that's a tough question because every case is different. So the factors are different, but clearly in this case, the pedestrian was not in a crosswalk. In fact, we were just a few yards from a signal-controlled intersection with a marked crosswalk. So why? And I understand it's a female. So why she chose to cross Orange Thorpe in this particular location is unknown. That is going to be part of the investigation, why she crossed there as opposed to a few yards this way. So in terms of establishing, cause or fault, all of those factors need to be considered and analyzed, and we do that through physical evidence. There's some physical evidence out here on the street.
I would think that there would be something involved with whether the driver tried to avoid the pedestrian or whether they gunned it and tried to, get closer to the, all those different factors. Like you said, there's probably a million of them just based on whatever circumstance was involved.
Right. So, in this case, it looks like a newer car in really good condition. So, more than likely any mechanical failure is going to be ruled out. There are no skid marks. That would be part of physical evidence, but I didn't see any. But there are other things out there on the roadway that helps the investigators figure out location of the pedestrian, the area of impact where that may have occurred, things like that. And then witness statements are huge. Apparently there were people standing around that may have seen this. So, a lot of times people will hear things and look, and what they actually see is the aftermath. So if they actually saw the impact versus, their attention being drawn, to the collision after the fact, those are two different things. So sometimes that takes a little bit of investigation to figure out.
Well, you brought up another interesting point, which is if you're a driver in the area and you see what happened, it's best for you to stay around as well to be able to provide more information about the situation.
That becomes very, very helpful in cases like this where it's a serious crash, or whenever we investigate fatal accidents or crime scenes. A lot of times Orange Thorpe is a busy thoroughfare. There are a lot of people on the street right now. It's dark, but it's not late.
And we're safe because you've blocked off the street.
Right. We closed off the street so we can investigate. So, I think that in terms of trying to establish cause and just nail down exactly what happened from start to finish is a process, and the supervisors here, investigators, are kind of setting up for a long investigation. So I heard them calling for barricades and that sort of thing.
Unit 97, handle the last.
So it's kind of quiet tonight. There was the first incident of a vehicle hitting a pedestrian. Now we have another one. Um, the units have all cleared, but we have footage from when everything was going on. Um, do you know what happened here?
You know, the way this accident happened is eerily similar to the way the accident on Orangethorpe occurred. So again, there was a pedestrian in the roadway crossing La Palma outside of Mark Crosswalk, and you know
In a dark area.
It is dark, and again, it's not very late, but it is dark. Um, so at this stage of the game, it's still under investigation. Um, and so so we're not really sure if speed and what are all contributing factors may be involved. So preliminarily, it just appears as though the primary factors are the pedestrian and the roadway, in a place where vehicles aren't expecting to see someone walking in the street.
It was interesting that the driver and passenger of the vehicle stayed in the vehicle. They're still in the vehicle, as opposed to the other location where they got out. Safer?
I think it's safer, yes. And if you're going to get out of your vehicle, there may be circumstances where that's necessary. If your vehicle's disabled, or it's catches on fire, or it can't be secured, so maybe it's moving, that sort of thing, then get completely off the roadway. There's a parking lot here next to where we're at. That would be the safest place. Otherwise, stay in your car. So,
does it matter that the vehicle is moved, or should it stop and stay where it happened?
It is important in serious collisions, only from an evidence perspective. But ordinarily, move the vehicle out of the roadway. The traffic hazard that it creates with other traffic and looky-loos and so on actually heightens the danger. So, if you can move it off the roadway, if the vehicle is drivable and you can do that safely, then that's a good suggestion.
It is crazy the amount of officers a situation like this takes. I know it's behind the camera, but there's 2 police cars down at the intersection. You've got, not counting the one we're in, there's 2, 3, 4, 5 fish or so. It's crazy. I mean, Buena Park has a good number of officers out tonight, but this takes all of them.
I unfortunately, I can tell you that between this crash and the first incident that we were on, which is still being investigated, it depleted all our resources. So we would have to break personnel away to go handle any emergency calls from this point forward. So this will be under investigation for a short while, because there may be serious injuries involved in this crash too. We want to make sure that we do a very thorough investigation, that we look for all physical evidence that's out there on the roadway. It's just hard to do when it's dark and there are other traffic out there. So a lot of times there's some aspect of criminality involved, even though this is a traffic collision. So we just want to make sure that we're doing the best investigation possible, so that we collect any of that evidence. So let me interrupt you just for a second so I can direct this car as they try to exit.
Hey, CSI's gonna be around there. Okay, got it? I was gonna get it. Oh, I thought you had a long time. No, no. Serious. What are you doing?
So that's the other issue, is that in particular, this is in front of a parking lot, and the vehicles, you have to get them out of the area, but not get into the area where you're investigating.
Yeah, so this is an elementary school. So the ball field in the back of the school was actually being used for soccer practice. So practice was over and everyone was trying to leave while we had this area locked down.
We talk about how drivers are so distracted now. It's risky even in a crosswalk, it's risky to be in the street.
You know, it really is. Often pedestrians misjudge speed, and there's nothing that indicates that this vehicle was speeding. But when you're a pedestrian in the street, that's not intended for you to be crossing. You know, drivers aren't accustomed to looking for you there. And you know, this La Palma is a large street. There's multiple lanes each direction, and for a pedestrian who's not paying attention or misjudges the distance or the speed of an approaching vehicle, that's a bad mixture.
You know, I remember a long time ago, my mom told me, when you're crossing the crosswalk, make sure the driver sees you. Make sure you make eye contact before you take your foot into the road. And even though this is just impossible to do here, it just reminds everyone you have to be the car versus a person. The car is always going to win.
The car will always win. You know, a lot of people, and I don't know if this factor came into play in this particular case, but a lot of people assume that the pedestrian always has the right of way, and that's not the truth. You know, it's not okay for a pedestrian to leave a place of safety to step out into the roadway. That's a violation. You can actually get a ticket for that.
Wait, can you say that again? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that it's not that the pedestrian has the right of the way every single time, no matter when they want it.
Right. So pedestrians do have the right of way when they're in a marked crosswalk, when they are at a signal-controlled intersection and the signal says that it's okay for you to cross. And even in those instances, you still need to look before you step out into the street, because even if you're within your legal rights or have the right of way, if you get hit, you're not going to win against a car. So in this particular case, there is no crosswalk, or at least the crosswalk is a good distance, probably more than 100 yards from here. So pedestrians shouldn't be crossing here. And it's dark, and you know, vehicles through this area of La Palma are traveling about 35 miles an hour. So
If they're following the speed limit.
if they're following the speed limit, and like I said earlier, it doesn't appear as though that this car was speeding, or at least there's no evidence to indicate that. And this is almost a carbon copy of the first accident that we went on. The damage to the car by the pedestrian's body on the windshield and the hood of the car is almost identical to what I saw on the first crash.
That's crazy. I mean, it's sad, of course, but you know, what do you do? What do you do?
You know, people just need to learn to stay out of the street. It sounds silly to say, right? I mean, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but you know, when you're a pedestrian, you need to be up on the sidewalk. And honestly, I've investigated many crashes where pedestrians were involved in accidents on the sidewalk or in parking lots. So there's no guarantee, you know, unless you're paying attention. You know, again, that's situational awareness. We talk about that all the time. You kind of have to have your head on that swivel where you're looking around and you're making sure that, you know, it's safe for you to cross. It's safe for you to be, you know, in the area you're in. It's safe for you to approach your vehicle in a parking lot.
Well, and you're talking about this, and right behind you over your shoulder, there's a vehicle that started coming into the center area, and the officers are actually making her back up because she was wanting to get somewhere and was going to get there no matter what.
Right. You know, and that always happens. People who are out driving, and especially when we have their particular route closed down, and for whatever reason they just don't understand another way to get to where they need to go. They'll needle their way through, you know, between barricades, past officers who are directing traffic. That lends itself to the danger when officers are working a scene like this. So, you know, you wonder why the large fire trucks park themselves perpendicular across the roadway and that sort of thing. They're Firefighters are trained to do that, to use their equipment, the assets, for barrier protection, not only for the victims in the collision, but for themselves, so they can get out and work.
Sure, because they're bending down, paying attention to the patient, not paying attention to the vehicles that are coming through.
Right. So, you know, and the same with the police officers. They use their vehicles and position them in strategic locations to help control traffic and so on. So, you know, just because officers and first responders are working a collision scene doesn't mean that it's safe and for people to be milling around. You know, when I was investigating crashes as a motor officer, that used to drive me nuts. You know, I would get the documents I needed. I would go out and do the the visual inspection that I needed to do, and I would get up on the sidewalk or a safe place and take my notes there, do my interviews there. And you know, I wasn't scared to be out in the street, but there's no need to be needlessly putting yourself at risk.
They just had to move another car going backwards because they still keep coming in.
Yeah, you know, it looks like it's nighttime out here. You know, it is dark, but again, you know, it's we're back to standard time, and I'm not even sure what time it is. Do you know?
It's 7:10.
Yeah. So you know, I mean, it's not very late, but it got dark a little after 5. So I think that the time change, you know, people are going to have to get accustomed to that, and later in the season, into the winter months when we get more rain, that will cause another layer of complication for drivers.
It's crazy, isn't it?
You know, there's nothing worth pushing it or rushing or driving distracted or speeding around. You know, it's better to be late than not make it at all.
If you have any questions about tonight's show, you can call the Buena Park Police Department at 562-3901 or check us out on the internet at bppd.com. With Sergeant Chris Nunez, I'm Jane Cameron. Watch before you cross the streets, and thanks for watching.